there are people, and as I say, Mr. Leopold knows it better than me, there are people who have a legal right to come to America and have to wait 10 years. Or more, right? Or more.
20 years, 3 years by a brother.
Yeah. So there's a lot we can do a lot better. I think we should put more resources into this. We should make it more sensible, and we should make it more efficient. But I also think we should enforce the laws we have. I think we should enforce the laws we have because as supporters of immigration, our credibility is greater if we acknowledge that there is a downside for unlimited, unchecked illegal immigration. There is a downside. I think the pluses outweigh the downside, but I think there is a downside. Yeah, Mr. Lustig.
It's been government policy in education to teach those who do not speak English in their native language. In your research for this book, did you encounter opinions from those you interviewed as to whether that is the best way to integrate newcomers into America, or would it be better to follow something like the Israeli system, and that is to immerse newcomers in the language in an intensive program so that they are fluent in the language of the country?
That's an excellent question, and I'm of two minds about that, Mr. Lustig, because on one hand, we want people to be civically knowledgeable. So if we publish voting materials and information in Spanish, we have a better educated electorate. So that everybody benefits from that. So if we teach kids in their native language in school, they're likely to do better, at least at first, because you can connect to them. But there is a downside. The implication of your question is true, that if they don't learn English, then we're not doing them a favor. If I look at the families in my book who have had the most trouble adjusting to America, the single most prominent reason is they don't learn English. That is the single, education skill level, of course, is important. But there's a man from Burma in this book. He's a Muslim, and 3 Muslim daughters, and he was so frightened by America. The people are not consistent. This is a man who, for years and years back in Burma, yearned to come to America and complained to his family that they were low on the list and yearned for the freedoms of America. And he came to America, and the freedoms he encountered scared the hell out of him. He thought it would challenge his traditions. He thought it would challenge his position in the family. He thought it would challenge his daughter's virtue. And one of the things he did was ban English in the house. He insisted they speak Gujarati, the language they spoke back in Burma. And today he will say it's the worst thing he ever did, because he never learned English well, and therefore he never got a good job. The only jobs he could get were menial jobs. Finally, he found an export-import business that allowed him to do his business in Urdu. And he speaks Urdu at business. He finally got a decent paying job. But it took him to that situation. So I agree that we should teach people English. I very strongly believe in that. But I also believe in connecting people to the community and to the fabric of our civic life. And if we can do that through their own languages, there's a benefit to that too. There's also a total misnomer. There's a misimpression here. People look at the Hispanic population and say, well, they can now live in communities where everybody speaks Spanish and they never have to learn English, as if somehow there's something new about this. There's nothing new about this. I was reading a book the other day about a very good book I recommend to anybody interested in immigration. It's called The Long Way Home. It's a new book just coming out. And this author has found 12 immigrants who came to America in the early part of the 20th century from Europe, many of them fleeing from the draft in their home countries. And they get drafted into the American army and get sent back to Europe to fight for America in World War I. Absolute fascinating book. But he draws a picture of this Polish recruit in the mining town in Pennsylvania. This man never spoke English. As he said, church spoke Polish, mine owner spoke Polish, the tavern owner spoke Polish. He never had, the newspapers were in Polish, never had to learn English. So this notion that somehow the Spanish-speaking community is different from our history is just wrong. We've always had that. But what happens is, almost without exception, the next generation learns English. almost without exception. And almost without exception, the next generation surpasses their parents in terms of education. Problem the Hispanic community is finding is that they start from such a low educational base. All the statistics show that the first generation born in this country meets all of the same patterns of exceeding their parents. They go about 6 grades higher in school than their parents ever did. But when their parents dropped out of school in the 3rd grade, they're still not high school graduates. So what we're finding with the Hispanic community is because so many of the newcomers have such a low educational level that even it's going to take maybe an extra generation for their children to reach that level, but it's going to happen. It's going to take a little longer. But it's a very good question because I do not agree with those who say that English, I don't agree with the notion of English should be an official language or that we should only have official documents in English, but I do think they should learn English because my experience tells me it's the single most important way in which you make your way in America.
I wanted to thank you, first of all, for writing this book and for your words. I think it's absolutely critical to educate the American public on this. And I think what you're really talking about, in a sense, is redefining this issue as a positive economic issue, and I think that's extremely important. I wanted to ask you a question from a little bit different perspective. The New York Times, through Nina Bernstein, has recently published a series of articles. There's been an unprecedented 107 deaths in immigration detention since 2003, and we have a system where immigrants who are detained by the government are treated like we would expect them to be treated in some horrible country somewhere. Just wanted to get your take as to the due process angle of reform and how that fits into the big picture. I realize it might be a little bit off, but I was curious.
Well, look, even immigrants without legal status are entitled to a certain basic concept of human rights. We talk about human rights as a universal principle, right? We lecture other countries correctly, in my view, about their failure because we say we have a moral authority to tell you what to do on human rights because it's a universal principle. So shouldn't that apply to immigrants in our country? If we lecture China about treating their citizens better, don't we have to treat our own citizens better? I mean, the principle, if it's universal, and it applies to lawbreakers, and it applies to illegal immigrants, as well as to our citizens. So I do think there's a due process issue. But I do have to apparently wind up here. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being a great audience. I knew Cleveland would appreciate this book, and I was right. Thanks a lot.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a Friday Forum featuring Stephen Roberts, professor, columnist, and best-selling author. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.